Last Friday night, Bill Maher said it was worth asking why Putin invaded Ukraine under Biden and not Donald Trump. And that's kind of remarkable. I know that Bill Maher has sort of been waking up to the reality of the fake news narrative, but for even him to come out and give any kind of credit to Trump, it's quite amazing. I mean, look, Bill Maher has always been fairly anti-SJW or whatever because he's a guy who kind of believes more in libertarian ideals, not completely. But for him to actually defend Trump for any reason, well, you can see we're making progress, especially among more moderate liberal types who are kind of getting fed up. And I think this story here about Bill Maher shows that the narrative is being shattered. Tulsi Gabbard has a really important tweet about the invasion, about biolabs. She says, Mitt Romney, you have called me a treasonous liar for stating the fact that there are 25 plus U.S.-funded biolabs in Ukraine, which if breached would release and spread deadly pathogens to the U.S. and the world, and therefore must be secured in order to prevent new pandemics. Bizarrely, she then goes on, and I'll read through more of these tweets. But the reason I bring this up is because I don't even play it as hard as, say, Tulsi Gabbard was in terms of when the first stories came out about biolabs. I said I thought it wasn't true because what happened was there was a meme. I think this is a fair point for me. There was a meme showing attacks in Ukraine and biolabs. They didn't sync up. You know, like they were kind of close to each other. And someone was saying, look at all these attacks by Russia. They must be going after biolabs. And I'm just like, these attacks and these biolabs are not in the same place. And if you're wondering why there are so many attacks in close range, well, it's because they build biolabs in major metro areas or close to them. And in a war, or at least here, Vladimir Putin was attacking major urban environments. He's not going to go attack an empty forest, is he? So that's, I don't think Putin was targeting them. But in terms of why he invaded under Biden and not Trump, I think you need to look only so far as ISIS. I want to break down for you the realities of what we've been seeing over the past 10 years, at least as far as I think I understand it. And again, it's not easy to understand. But I want you to know that, when you see the story about Bill Maher, there's a reason why I like to highlight sometimes when he says something, because he's supposed to be this narrative pushing liberal guy. He had been for a long time. Secular atheist, liberal Bill Maher. And over the past several years, he's been almost breaking through that mesh layer into realizing what's really going on. Perhaps Bill Maher knows that he knows what's going on. Perhaps he knows the truth. Perhaps the narrative has already been shattered. But in order to get more people to wake up to what's going on, he just kind of plays it slightly on the left, but entertains these questions. I was having a conversation with a friend just a few days ago, and I asked them what they thought about Ukraine. This is somebody who just gets their news from the mainstream media, is not very involved, doesn't really care about this stuff. And they said, it's really, really bad. I said, do you think Vladimir Putin is bombing civilians? And they were like, yeah, of course. And then I said, why? For power, to just show people how powerful he is. And I was like, does that really make sense? I mean, no, look, let's, for real. I mean, does that make sense for someone to just bomb civilians so that people know they're powerful? I don't think if you're trying to win a war and gain control of a region, you can't just massacre non-combatants. That would be bad for your strategy. However, for Ukraine, we know the president of Ukraine has lied about radiation. I get it. The president of Ukraine is desperately in need of foreign intervention. How would you go about getting it? Oh no, Russia's killed a bunch of civilians. Now you have to intervene. You see, there's a red line. This is what they say in war. There's a red line. And we heard it in Syria. If Assad uses chemical weapons, that's a red line for us. Yeah, well, the U.S. basically, and the U.S.'s allies were somehow providing funding. U.S. allies is probably the safest way to put it, but, I think the U.S. was definitely involved when you look at it. The safest way to put it is that way. But when they said there's a red line, if they do something so bad, we'll be forced to intervene. Okay, well, when you tell that to, when you say that, do you think that Zelensky doesn't understand this concept? So he's sitting there, Russia is doing surgical strikes, hitting, specific targets, trying to split the country in half. Zelensky is losing, Ukraine is losing. I think you got to avoid the propaganda. And that's what this is really all about, at least for me, propaganda. And what can he do to get NATO to intervene? He needs Russia to cross the red line. But why would Russia? Why would Vladimir Putin say, bomb civilians, then NATO gets involved? Why would he do that? That doesn't make sense. Why would Ukraine do it? To trigger a foreign response. But let's be real. There's a lot that goes on in war. Vladimir Putin could be counting on the fact that NATO will not get involved no matter what. So it is possible he's bombing civilians. I'm not saying he's not. In fact, no, I think it's fair to say Vladimir Putin absolutely is bombing civilians. What I mean to say is the question of, is he intentionally targeting them? And that's a different question, a question of intent. What we're seeing across the board is propaganda, manipulation. Tulsi Gabbard brings the facts. She actually says, with sources, Pentagon fact sheet, March 11th, 2022, has numerous statements directly and indirectly confirming the existence of U.S.-funded biolabs. The U.S., through their biothreat reduction program, has invested approximately $200 million in Ukraine since 2005, supporting 46 Ukrainian laboratories, health facilities, and diagnostic sites. CBS Face the Nation, March 13th, 2022, correspondent David Martin said a Pentagon official told him they're concerned about the existence of such biolabs in Ukraine. The concern is that the Russians will seize one of these biomedical research facilities that Ukraine has where they do research on deadly pathogens like botulism and anthrax, seize one of those facilities, weaponize the pathogen, and then blame it on Ukraine and the U.S. because the U.S. has been providing support for some of the research being done in these facilities. Full stop. But we were told this wasn't true. In fact, even right now, I love this. Do I have the tweet pulled up? Maybe I don't have it pulled up. It's from me. So let's just pull up my Twitter real quick, and I'll show you what I tweeted recently. So I said, whenever Twitter does this, I assume the opposite is true. This is a notification I received in the What's Happening section on Twitter. It says, Ukraine conflict. No foreign biological laboratories operate in Ukraine. U.S. Embassy, and Snopes says, because good old Snopes on par with the U.S. Embassy in terms of credibility. I don't know what that says for the embassy or for Snopes, but I assume it's something bad. No foreign biological labs. I hate these people so much. I don't like to hate people. I don't like to make shows about who I hate. And it's something I'm really frustrated. Let me sidetrack real quick. I see so much from many of these conservative outlets. And what they do is they hire new hosts, and it's like, we got a new show, and it's called like the Talking Step, and it's like with new host, and they just talk about things they hate, and people they hate, and I'm like, ugh. It's just frustrating. Now, I get it. I do political commentary. I definitely talk about these people and people I hate. But over at timcast.com, we haven't launched additional shows about people we hate. We've done a pop culture entertainment show. We've done a mysteries show. We're doing the vlog show. Because I don't want to just keep making content about who we hate. It sucks. That's what everyone's doing. And, surprisingly, the stuff we do obviously doesn't do as well. Now, Chicken City, 10,000 subs in a week. Look at that. A show about chickens, balking and stuff. That's some hope right there, I'll tell you this. But back to the point at hand. No foreign biological laboratories. I'll tell you why. If there is one group of people I hate more than anything, it is the big tech. It's the establishment. No foreign. You see the word they added? Foreign. No one's arguing they're foreign. No one's saying that other countries are operating these. Now, some people are saying there are U.S. biolabs. Okay, sure. But we didn't use the word foreign. You see the game they're playing? What most people are saying is that Ukraine has biolabs. They do. The U.S. has provided funding for some of these. They have. The U.S. has helped build some of them. Yes, they did. That's a fact. And the U.S. is cooperating with some of the research in some of these Ukrainian biolabs. Okay. Which means U.S. funded. First, they said there are no U.S. biolabs. And that was technically not true. You see, what is it? The truth, conspiracy theory becomes the truth in 6 months. I hate these people with such a passion because they are the most disgusting individuals. They lie. They spit in your face with every lie they say. But you know what gives me hope? The lies aren't sticking. The lies aren't working. No foreign biological laboratories operate in Ukraine, so saith Snopes. Well, I don't care what Snopes in the U.S. Embassy has to say. I do take note of the sources that Tulsi Gabbard has literally included, like media.defense.gov. That's the government website, saying that, CBS Face the Nation. Now, truth be told, Tulsi Gabbard quoting Face the Nation, I don't know, she's quoting somebody who's quoting somebody. But I'll tell you this. When Tulsi Gabbard says, CBS reporter says Pentagon is concerned about these labs, defense.gov says the U.S. has provided funding. So the question we then have is a legitimate question is, does Ukraine have biological laboratories? Are they being funded in any way or supported by the U.S.? You then get these fake fact checks where it's like, there are no foreign laboratories in Ukraine. That's not the question. But you see the dirty game they play. That's propaganda and manipulation. Which brings me back to Bill Maher. And what his question, which I think is a good question. Or I'm sorry, the question he says worth asking. Why Putin invaded Ukraine under Biden and not Trump? Well, I'm not sure. I don't want to drag the wrong person, but I quoted somebody. They said, because under Trump, he was basically playing to the Vladimir Putin agenda. He was giving Russians everything they wanted. So Putin just sat back and let it happen because he was winning with Trump doing his bidding. What he was really saying is Trump took actions that de-escalated and was ending war. Things we like. Trump flattened ISIS. Trump, that's right. Trump was a nasty guy in a lot of ways, and I guess that translated pretty well to destroying ISIS. The only problem? The U.S. liked ISIS. You see, the problem was the U.S. likes doing this thing where they fund insurgent groups and then have those insurgent groups fight and destabilize an area so the U.S. can then come in and pick up the pieces. You see, in Afghanistan over the past several decades, the U.S. has been funding, well, it started with the Mujahideen against the Soviets, and they turned into Al-Qaeda. With Syria, as many of you know, because you've heard me say it a million times, the U.S. wanted to build a pipeline through Syria, through Turkey, into Europe to offset Russia's Gazprom gas monopoly. I say monopoly loosely, but they control a large portion of natural gas into Europe, allowing them to very much set prices. If Western powers could get these gas pipelines into Europe, it would have to go through Syria, but it would lower the price of gas substantially for Europeans. Good for the West. Syria said no. Conveniently for the United States, we were looking for a way to get rid of Bashar al-Assad when civil war erupts. Even convenient still, rebel groups become ISIS and start just obliterating and destroying parts of the Middle East and bring Syria to its knees. How convenient for the U.S. agenda. How convenient for the U.S. that somehow, I love this story, by the way, a plumber saw his truck in Syria. Mark I plumbing truck makes another appearance. Original owner must feel coincidental regret. So this guy, Mark, feel bad for the guy. Mark I plumbing. He sold his truck. That's it. He sold his truck to a dealership. The dealership never removed his decal. The dealership apparently sold the truck, which got sent to Turkey, and then somehow given to ISIS. It's quite amazing, isn't it? So let me say this. This Texas plumber, whose old work truck was acquired by Syrian jihadis, mounted it with a large gun. Well, hold on there a minute, my friends. How does this happen? How do jihadis? They were saying he was an ISIS supporter. ISIS, it slurs to his business. It's interesting. The jihadis seen with the truck were associated with the Ansar al-Din Front, not ISIS. It's unclear if rebels still use the truck. One recent video purporting to show. Okay, yeah. Let me just show you this. Let's get more specific. America's allies are funding ISIS. The Islamic State, now threatening Baghdad, was funded for years by wealthy donors in Kuwait, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. 3 U.S. allies that have dual agendas. Or do they, Josh Rogan? Do they? Qatar? So we're trying to build a pipeline from Qatar through Syria, and then all of a sudden they're providing funding to ISIS, and ISIS is destabilizing Syria? Coincidence? Let me tell you why Vladimir Putin didn't invade Ukraine. Under Donald Trump, he flattens ISIS. He starts wiping them out. Trump does not care for a pipeline that has nothing to do with the United States. Trump absolutely cared that Vladimir Putin not invade Ukraine. So Putin's sitting back and he says, okay, our ally Syria is going to be able to regain control. ISIS is being shut down. Trump is doing that. Okay. Trump also fired 59 Tomahawk missiles into Syria. So Putin had a real reason to be upset about that. But Trump showed that he was willing to take aggressive action when needed. Trump also showed that he was doing what most regular Americans wanted, and that in the end was better for Russia. So you can say, but this was Putin's agenda. What's Putin's agenda in this instance? That he doesn't want the U.S. destabilizing its ally in Syria so that Qatar can build a pipeline? Was that it? Russia has their agenda. Putin obviously wants the Russian Federation. He wants the Soviet Union. He wants some strength. He refuses to bow. I think he's a bad guy. But with Trump was doing things I thought were good. ISIS is bad. Trump getting rid of them is good. Our allies providing funding to ISIS, bad. Our vehicles from the United States ending up in the hands of these people, bad. There's a lot more to go through I don't have pulled up. It's all propaganda. And you have to wonder why it is now that so many people believe that Vladimir Putin is just an evil guy who decided to randomly kill civilians and go into Ukraine. There's a reason. Of course there is. Vladimir Putin is not a comic book villain. Joe Biden is not. We don't live in a world of one-dimensional motives. I am Vladimir Putin and I'm going to take over the world. That's not how it works. There is a perspective and there are bad people. There are despots. There are, sociopathic individuals who are willing to hurt others to gain what they want. But there are reasons and logic behind it. You understand these motives, you can understand what's going on. And the reality is, under Trump, this would not have been happening. Just a fact. How the U.S. fueled the rise of ISIS in Syria and Iraq. The sectarian terror group won't be defeated by the Western states that incubated it in the first place. June of 2015 from The Guardian. So now it goes back to Bill Maher, to many others asking these questions. Why didn't they invade under Joe Biden? Under Trump, but they did under Joe Biden. Joe Biden's a bad president. The Democratic establishment is starting to lose. The narrative is starting to crack. That's why I highlight Tulsi Gabbard's tweets about the biolabs, because the narrative is that the establishment is desperately trying to cling to some kind of false reality, begging you, please don't know what we're doing in your name. I'm so sick of it. I just am so sick of it. So I was talking to that friend I mentioned earlier, and they said, why can't we all just get along? And I'm like, the world doesn't work that way. You know, I'm not going to sit here and entertain what the Democrat and the neocon administration, the neolibs and the neocons do. I'm not going to sit here and cheer for their war and insanity, but I'm also not going to pretend to be naive. There's a reason as to why the Democratic establishment does things. Now, of course, like Vladimir Putin, he's got his self-interest. Strange how so many Democrats and some Republicans have kids working in Ukraine. It's not just Joe Biden's son, Hunter. A lot of interest there. Because these are people who see the U.S. agenda. The administrative state has a plan. Build a pipeline through Syria over a long period of time. Offset Gazprom, gas monopoly, make a bunch of money. In the end, they justify it because they're like, we're going to be helping our allies in Europe. We're going to be bringing down costs for our European allies. This will allow us to gain more control and influence globally and help compete against China and Russia, our adversaries around the world. Thus, our values can be retained and expanded. Seems to be the general idea if we're being generous. You then end up with people like Joe Biden, Pelosi, Romney, etc. You get people who say, well, I get we're doing that. But can I make myself and my family extremely wealthy in the process? We're going to do it anyway. Might as well. I wet my whistle a little bit. And you end up with that corruption. Here's the problem. What values are really worth spreading at this point? The U.S. and their psychotic cult, CRT, the mindless zealotry behind war? Is that really worth spreading around the world? Is that really what we want to become the global norm? No. I'll tell you what I think would be great. Individual liberties with international cooperation. Sounds fantastic, doesn't it? A degree of personal and global responsibility. Yeah, it sounds good to me. And that is to say, we respect the individuals who want to live and let live. We recognize that we as humans do have some responsibility to the world and to others. We find a happy medium. We discuss things logically and intelligently, respectfully. We do have to take emergency action at some points, but we don't just decide to be comic book villains who would trample over people and steamroll through what we want because we think we're smarter than you. That, I think, is the problem. What ends up happening is everybody thinks they're justified in their actions because they're the heroes of their own story. I believe that decentralization of authority and power is the best path forward. You can compute better, faster, stronger, etc. Single individuals who think they're smarter than you can hyper-focus on an issue, not see the big picture, because of course no single human can, and then you catastrophe. No single human is going to save the planet. So I think we need decentralization of authority. The reality is China and Russia want power. They do not agree with our values. The problem is the United States doesn't even agree with its own values. And right now, the prevailing values of the institutions of the United States are woke cultism. So herein lies the big problem. When I see the United States fighting for its interests, I say, I'm an American. I like the United States. I like its founding values. And I think the values that, not all of them, I like the values we've instilled over time. The founding values were the seed planted that allowed us to grant more civil rights to more people than any other country on the planet in the history of this planet. Good thing. But where are we at now? Cult authoritarianism of racists. The critical race theorists are overtly racist. They want to create race-based reality. It's psychotic. And I don't want the planet to be to function under those values. So then I look at what the U.S. is claiming to do, and I say, there is no greater good in your actions in starting these wars. There is no greater good in what the U.S. is doing with biolabs. There's no greater good for China. There's no greater good for Russia. So the fact is, to me, it's a bunch of mostly villains. And I look at the U.S. and there's one thing I can say. Well, if the U.S. wins, at least my interests are taken care of. But I'm just to a point where I really just don't care about these powerful interests internationally who put the boot on your neck and claim it's for the greater good. Sorry, I'm not interested in perpetuating your lies for whatever dumb reason. Yeah, I will resist Chinese authoritarianism, Russian authoritarianism, and U.S. authoritarianism. It's all bad. I do think, to a certain degree, it's better that the U.S. defeats its adversaries around the world, but the U.S. has become increasingly corrupt. It's just a zombie entity of some ridiculous cult and a bunch of politicians who are exploiting the system to enrich their families. It has become a zombie. However, when I see people like Bill Maher and regular people finally waking up, I say maybe there's an opportunity. Russell Brand, for instance, he's not American, but in the West, seeing this, maybe there's a way to excise the malignancy within the United States and restore the value of individual liberties and bring about real global cooperation that instills these individual liberties. I don't know how we'd do it, but I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.